We will tear your souls apart. Hello everyone, today's video I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I'll be doing a recording on Ed Gein. It was a famous notorious serial killer of Wisconsin. My friend Maxwell King, you'll all remember I did a YouTube video collaboration on Scream last year. He made a YouTube video on Ed Gein that inspired me to do the same thing. Shout out and thank you for inspiring me to make a video like this. Believe it or not, surprisingly, this serial killer inspired a lot of horror movies that we have today. Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Silence of the Lambs, and other miscellaneous horror movies you've either heard of or not seen before, and will surprise you how many horror movies took inspiration from serial killer Ed Gein, which we'll get into this video today. To start this video recording off, a little history background story on serial killer Ed Gein. Ed Gein was born August 27, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Ed Gein was a farmer and a handyman. People describe him as a nice, friendly, normal guy, but people did not know the dark secret behind closed doors about Ed Gein. People would never know or suspect that he was a serial killer behind closed doors. Ed Gein's father was an abusive alcoholic who worked odd jobs. He was a carpenter, he owned his own grocery store and other businesses, but they failed. His father died April 1st, 1940, at the age of 66, from pneumotic fluid on his lungs. It would not surprise he was a smoker. Ed Gein later told reporters that his father was verbally and physically abusive to him and his brother Henry. Ed's mother, Augusta, supposedly showed little to no grief over his father's death, and she told their sons that their father was destined to burn in hell. It sounds like she hated her husband. It also sounds like Ed Gein's parents' marriage was not a healthy one. After Ed's father's death, him and his brother both had to work on the farm to support himself and his family. Ed's brother Henry died from head trauma and was found burned alive, but to this day, there hasn't been enough evidence to prove on whether or not if Ed Gein really did murder his brother or not. Ed's brother's death, Augusta Gein, had a stroke. Ed was a caregiver for his mother. On December 29, 1945, Augusta Gein passed away at the age of 67 from another stroke. Ed Gein killed 2 females and he was a grave robber digger. He would dig up women's bodies, take the body parts, hang them for decoration. Ed would wear women's clothing, trying to become his mother. Ed wanted to know what it was like to be his mother and a woman, trying to understand why his mother was this mean, crazy, psychotic, domineering religious woman. This is very weird, disturbing, and sickening when you read about it. On November 16, 1957, Ed Gein was arrested for the murder and disappearance of Bernice Warden, a local hardware store owner. When the police arrested Ed Gein, they found Bernice's Warden's decapitated dead body hanging upside down in a shed. The police also found a collection of bones, human remains. He made the skulls and the bones. He would furnish upholstery into human skin, made masks in the face, and would wear them. Ed Gein confessed to the police he killed Bernice Warden and another woman, Mary Hogan. When the police arrested Ed Gein, despite arresting him and Ed confessing his crimes, they thought he was mentally unfit to stand trial. In 1967, he was trialed of Bernice Warden's murder and found guilty, but was declared not guilty for reason of being insanity. Ed Gein was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It feels weird, I hate saying this. It sounds like Ed Gein must have been one of the few times where someone was tried for being both found guilty and not guilty at the same time. You don't hear that very often. From 1957 until Ed Gein's death, he was committed to Central State Hospital for criminally insane in Waupun, Wisconsin. In 1978, Ed Gein was transferred to the Mendota Mental Health Institution in Madison, Wisconsin. On July 26, 1984, Ed Gein died from respiratory failure and cancer at the age of 77. Ed Gein was buried in Plainfield Cemetery in Wisconsin. Ed is buried between his mother and brother. Believe it or not, in 2000, Ed Gein's gravestone was stolen. It was later recovered by authorities, but they chose not to replace it. To this day, the grave is unmarked. Reading this made me think to myself, who the heck would do that? Steal a gravestone of a notorious serial killer. Now that we talked about a brief bio on Ed Gein, here's a comparison analysis of what horror movies that were inspired from Ed Gein. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho was the first horror movie that was inspired from Ed Gein. For 1960, Psycho shocked audiences and were terrified of it, especially if no one expected Janet Leigh's character to be killed off early in the movie. That was a big risk back in 1960 to kill off the main character early in the movie. The reason for this movie being inspired from Ed Gein was his mother. Augustus Gein, Ed Gein's mother, was the inspiration for Norma Bates. Just like Norma Bates, Ed Gein's mother was a control freak to Ed and his brother. Augusta Gein wouldn't let Ed have friends or a girlfriend. She was also a religious psychotic freak. She would have Ed and her brother read the Bible a lot over and over again, have them memorize the Bible. Ed Gein's mother isolated Ed and her brother. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not saying this is the facts on Ed Gein being a killer, but too much isolation could have maybe been a contributing factor to Ed Gein, how his mother didn't let Ed go out and have a social life. It's not healthy to isolate yourself from people. We all need friends and interactions with other human beings. Just like Norman Bates, he had mother issues like Ed Gein had with his mother. Sorry for spoilers right here on Psycho. Norman Bates was the killer dressing up as his mother because his mother killed people, wanted to keep his mother's spirits alive to keep the killing spree legacy going. Also, like Norman Bates, Ed Gein heard his mother's voice in his head. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre inspiration for Ed Gein was an interesting story. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre inspiration for Ed Gein was an interesting story. Tobe Hooper said that he was standing in a line at a hardware store during the Christmas season. He looked at a chainsaw and thought of an idea for a horror movie on a guy who kills his victims with chainsaws. And of course, just like Alfred Hitchcock, he read about Ed Gein. Leatherface is a cannibal skinned by his victims and wore the skin. That's what Ed Gein did. Like Ed Gein, this is where the inspiration for Leatherface has multiple personality disorders came from. Ed Gein is the original Leatherface, ladies and gentlemen. When you see Leatherface's bone decoration in his home, just like Ed Gein, he had a collection of bones and skulls in his home, just like Ed Gein. Ed Gein would cut off half of the skull bone and use it as a bowl or a jar. As a fan of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this is something new I discovered, never noticed at the dinner table with Sally and the Leatherface family. The skin mask of the lamb was something Ed had in his home, and they found that when he was arrested. I never realized that the lamb had skin on it. I guess because I'm already disturbed and freaked out by the Leatherface cannibal family, I didn't think twice that there was a lamb with skin on it. The one major difference between Ed Gein and Leatherface is that Leatherface was a cannibal and Ed Gein was not a cannibal. Some rumors people think that Ed Gein was a cannibal, but again, not enough evidence to support this. Ed Gein denied that he was not a cannibal, but Ed admitted to the police to digging bodies, decapitated and disemboweled, making household items like lampshades, furniture made from human skin, made masks out of human face skin, and used the skulls as bowls. Not to get off topic, anytime I rewatch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, being a future physical therapist assistant major, I try my best to point out which bone is which to my knowledge. When I studied anatomy and physiology, I would joke with my classmate, watch horror movies, and help you study and remember the bones and muscles and organs in no time. Jonathan Demme's The Silence of the Lambs. The character Buffalo Bill was inspired from Ed Gein. Like Ed Gein, Buffalo Bill would wear woman's clothing and skin, despite he was a man, but he felt deep down he was a woman. Buffalo Bill was a transvestite. Buffalo Bill kidnapped women. He wanted to make a woman's suit. When I was a teenager in high school, freshman year, I took a criminal justice class. From the title of the class, it is what you expect the class of the title would be, criminal justice. We read newspaper and write essays on current events, crime events, watch documentary shows on people who were on death row, the death penalty, or people who were accused of crimes they did not commit, and it took them half their life to prove their innocence. One of the assignments we did in the classroom was we had to do an assignment, an essay on a famous serial killer. To be quite honest, I don't remember which serial killer I picked and wrote about. My point is here is that I remember reading on my option which famous serial killer to pick and write an essay about. Ed Gein was one of the first famous serial killers I read about. Before I knew anything about other famous serial killers I read about as I got older, like Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, Richard Ramirez the Night Stalker, the Zodiac Killer, Lizzie Borden, and Wayne Williams. Recently, Netflix TV show Ryan Murphy's Monster was the same show that gave us a season of Jeffrey Dahmer, the Menendez brothers, did an entire season on Ed Gein. I binge watched the entire show. It was very sick, disturbing, very uncomfortable to watch at times. And from watching the TV show, it all clicks and adds in where Alfred Hitchcock, Tobe Hooper, and Jonathan Demme all got their inspirations from reading about serial killer Ed Gein for their horror movies of Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs. From watching this show, I'm not sure how 100% true and accurate this show is, being based on Ed Gein from fact and fiction in real life. So I did a little research as best as possible. Here are a few examples from the show from fact and fiction. Sorry if it's not in order. Also, there will be some spoilers right here. If you've not seen the show yet, stop the video right here. The girl Adeline, played by Susanna Son, was not his accomplice. In the show, Adeline was Ed's girlfriend, whereas in reality, it's not clear on whether or not if they ever were a couple. The real Adeline Watkins admitted that she knew Ed as a quiet and polite friend, but nothing more. Ed Gein did not have a relationship with Bernice Worden. This is the second victim of Ed Gein that he killed. The one thing they didn't get right on the show, how in real life, Ed Gein shot at her local hardware store while she was working. There is no evidence of them ever being romantically involved, but Ed did admit that he killed Bernice Worden. In the show, we see Ed Gein kill his brother because he wanted to marry his girlfriend and leave home. As I said before, it has never been proven to this day on whether or not if Ed Gein really killed his brother. The disappearance and death of Evelyn Hartley, played by Addison Rae in the show, Ed was obsessed with Evelyn, a 15-year-old girl who Ed abducts and later kills her. In reality, on October 1953, she disappeared, and to this day, her disappearance and death remains unknown to this day, a mystery that has still never been unsolved. When Ed was arrested, he was a primary suspect by the police, but they never found any evidence on whether or not if Ed Gein really killed Evelyn Hartley. When Ed took the lie detector test, asking if he killed Evelyn Hartley, he passed. The lie detector test said he did not kill Evelyn Hartley. Ed Gein radio called famous Nazi actress criminal Elsa Koch. From watching the show, apparently, Ed Gein read about her in magazines. Christine Jorgensen was considered one of the first transgender women to change her sex. Ed has a conversation with her on the radio thinking that he might be a woman, but tells Ed that he is a gynephilia. But the twist right here is that he never had any radio contact with any of these people. It was the psychiatrist that told him that he was gynephilia. They gave him a ham radio, but there was no place to plug it in, but unfortunately it did not work. You can say Ed Gein hallucinated, heard or saw things that were not there. Also, Ed talked to himself while listening to voices, hence why he was a schizophrenic. But once again, it is unknown if Ed Gein identified himself as a gynephilic. Gynephilia means being sexually or romantically attracted to women or femininity. In the show, we see Ed Gein have sex with dead corpses, but in real life, Ed Gein denied he never did necrophilia because the dead corpses smell bad. In one episode, we see that Ed Gein helped catch Ted Bundy, but in real life, Ed Gein did not help catch Ted Bundy. Seeing and reading about this made me think this sounds like Silence of the Lambs, but as I said before in this video, Ed Gein was an inspiration for Silence of the Lambs. In this show, it explores how other famous serial killers were influenced by Ed Gein. Serial killer Richard Speck on the show says Ed Gein was his idol, and that the murderer is who I wanted to be, and he's who I became. In real life, there is no evidence that Ed Gein and Richard Speck ever had any contact with each other or wrote to Ed Gein. Richard Speck was convicted of murdering 8 women who were nursing students in Chicago in 1966. In real life, Speck distanced himself from other criminals and didn't like himself being compared to other serial killers. I'm sure there's more fact and fiction to this show, but this was just a basic comparison. I'll be here forever comparing the show to the real-life Ed Gein story. Let me know in the comments what the show got right or wrong from fact or fiction. Charles Hunman, who you all might recognize from Sons of Anarchy, did a very good job portraying serial killer Ed Gein, who had a lot of serious mental problems. How Ed Gein was sick, disturbing, knowing something was off and wrong with him mentally and psychologically. In a few episodes, we see Alfred Hitchcock making Psycho and talking about Ed Gein for inspiration. We also explore a little bit on Anthony Perkins going method acting for how he wanted to portray Norman Bates and a little bit of his sexuality, because in real life, Anthony Perkins was gay. We also see the inspiration of Norman Bates' dead mother comes from. Supposedly Ed Gein has her dead body decomposed corpse upstairs in her bedroom. As I mentioned before in the show, they show us seeing how Tobe Hooper got the idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre standing in line at a hardware store during Christmas time looking at a chainsaw, just thinking of the idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I highly doubt Ed Gein swung a chainsaw around like in the ending of Texas Chainsaw Massacre again. It would not surprise me if Tobe Hooper probably just made that up for the movie to make it look good and scary. In episode 7, they showed a brief behind the scenes of the making of Silence of the Lambs, the famous Buffalo Bill dance scene, how Ed Gein thought he was a transvestite. They don't explore much on the making of Jonathan Demme's The Silence of the Lambs. Maybe the scenes were cut for time, but again, I am not 100% sure on this. Besides this recent show on Ed Gein for Netflix, there have been other adaptations of Ed Gein. In 2000, there was a direct-to-video movie with Steven Rausbeck playing Ed Gein. I never saw this, I can't make a comment on it, but I do remember as a little kid my grandmother had a VHS tape copy of this movie, but don't ask me why. In 2007, there was another direct-to-video movie called Ed Gein with Kane Hodder, aka Jason Voorhees. Once again, I never saw this, I can't make a comment on this movie, but according to my friend Jeremy, he said that it wasn't that good, and he also said that we both agree is that, well, we both like Kane Hodder, he feels miscast for the role of Ed Gein, and he looks nothing like Ed Gein. I don't think Ed Gein was not a gym rat. Kane Hodder's a big fit buff dude. I watched a video from WatchMojo.com recently, a video they made on horror movies that were inspired from Ed Gein. Some I already knew, the basics of Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Silence of the Lambs. And some of these other movies they mentioned never would have occurred to me, but I'll admit, I haven't seen half of these movies they mentioned. Rob Zombie's 2007 Halloween remake. Okay, right at the bat if you know me at this point on my YouTube channel that I'm a huge fan of the Halloween franchise, and this I've seen before. While the original Halloween is not inspired from Ed Gein, John Carpenter said that he saw a mental patient at a mental hospital. Seeing that mental patient is what the inspiration for Michael Myers. But to this day, that mental patient remains anonymous. Watch Mojo pointed out how Rob Zombie's Halloween remake could have been inspired from Ed Gein, which is interesting, but I never saw the connection. Maniac Cop and Motel Hell. I've never seen any of these movies, so I can't make a comment, but apparently, these movies were also inspired from Ed Gein. Con Air, well, this is an action movie, not a horror movie, but I never would have thought or imagined that Steve Buscemi's character was inspired from Ed Gein for this movie. Otis B. Driftwood from Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses. I'll admit, I haven't seen this in a long time, since I was in high school when I finally got into horror movies. I'm not really much of a fan of Rob Zombie movies. I like his music, but that's a different story. His movies are too over the top and require certain tastes. Once again, just like I did in my Devil's Rejects video with Wolfman Sam, comparing Bill Moseley's character being named after a Groucho Marx character from his movies, same with this movie. This character, Otis Driftwood, is named after a character from a Marx Brothers movie called A Night at the Opera. Otis B. Driftwood, and believe it or not, it's been a dream project of Rob Zombie wanting to direct a biography movie on the Marx Brothers, Groucho Marx, because he's a fan of the Marx Brothers. I know what you're thinking. How did I go from Ed Gein to Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses to the Marx Brothers comparison? No idea myself. This is what I get for being a geek. American Horror Story Season 2 Asylum. The character Dr. Oliver Thredson, played by modern Star Trek Spock actor Zachary Quino. The writers of the show took inspiration from Ed Gein. It's been a while since I've seen this show and the season. I remember when I first saw it, it shocked me. His character was not what I expected. I won't spoil it, give it a watch. 1974's Strange. I'll admit, I saw this a long time ago back in 2019 at the Cinema Arts Center in Long Island, an all-night horror movie marathon. It was very good, but again, it's been so long, it's hard to comment on a movie I've not seen in years, so yeah, not much of a comment on it. Very good, but again, not allowed to comment at the moment. In Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, when Travis and Nancy are having coffee and a pie at a diner, Travis ordered some apple pie with a slice of melted cheese. This was a reference to Ed Gein. When Ed Gein finally confessed his crimes he committed, he requested he wanted some apple pie with a slice of melted cheese. In American Psycho, while it's not inspired from Ed Gein, in this movie there's a scene where Patrick Bateman is talking to friends at some bar or club. Getting to a point they're talking about women, Patrick brings up what Ed Gein's philosophy was on women in the conversation. How when Ed Gein would see a pretty woman walking down the street, I think two things. One party wants to take her around, talk to her, and be real nice and sweet to her, and treat her right. Josh Lucas' character asks Patrick, what did the other part of Ed think about women? Patrick Bateman responds to, what her head would look like on a stick. Patrick laughs, and he's the only one laughing. His friends look at him like, what the fuck is wrong with Patrick? And what was he thinking? What the hell is that supposed to mean? The ironic thing about this, Patrick Bateman confused and misquoted the wrong serial killer. It was serial killer Edmund Kemper's the one that said, what I would look like on a stick about women. I hope you all liked this video and learned something from it, thinking, wow, this is insane, crazy, and fascinating to think that this is where the inspirations for Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs, and now this is why we have these classic horror movies in today's modern society. See y'all next time.